The wind howled across the wide Montana valley, kicking up the scent of dry grass and pine needles. Grace Turner tightened the wool shawl around her shoulders and cursed under her breath. The fence line was broken again. Life on a struggling ranch left no room for rest, especially since her father passed and left her fighting off debt collectors and drought all at once. The barn doors creaked as she pushed them open, and that's when she saw him, a man asleep in the hay, his broad shoulders rising and falling under a tattered coat. A stranger. His hat covered his face, and beside him, a dark bay horse stood tethered, ribs showing, as if both man and beast had come from another world entirely. "Hey," she called sharply, picking up a pitchfork for courage. "You planning to pay rent for my hay, or just steal my peace while you're at it?" The man stirred, slow and steady. He sat up, pushing back his hat, and the morning light caught his face, weathered, handsome, eyes the color of distant thunderclouds. He didn't flinch or apologize. He just looked at her, calm as still water. "Didn't mean to trespass, ma'am," he said softly. "Just needed a place to rest a spell. I'll be gone by noon." Something about his voice unsettled her, gentle but heavy, like it carried stories buried deep. "Name?" she asked. That he hesitated. "Call me Colt." It was a simple name, but something about it felt deliberate. Like a man used to hiding. Grace sighed. "Fine. You can stay long enough to feed that poor horse and yourself. But don't think I'm running a charity." He gave a slow nod, then got to work as if he'd done it his whole life. He mended her fences without being asked, repaired a water pump she'd been fighting for months, and treated her animals with quiet respect. The man was a mystery, but his hands spoke of old strength and old pain. At night, Grace found herself watching him from the porch, the way he sat by the fire, staring into the flames as if seeing ghosts. He rarely spoke of himself, but sometimes, when the wind died and the stars came out, she thought she heard him whisper a name under his breath. One evening, she asked, "Who was she?" He froze. The firelight flickered in his eyes, and for a long moment, he said nothing. Then, barely above a whisper, "Someone I couldn't save." Grace didn't push further. She just sat beside him, close enough for the warmth to reach them both. Something fragile began to grow there, two broken souls mending in silence, but peace doesn't last long on the plains. A black truck rolled up the next morning, kicking dust into the yard. A man in a suit stepped out, holding a stack of papers. "You Grace Turner," he barked. "This ranch's collateral's due in 2 weeks. If you can't pay, it goes to foreclosure." Grace's heart dropped. 2 weeks? That's impossible. Colt watched from the fence line, eyes narrowing. The man sneered, "You should have sold when you had the chance. Some big outfit's buying up land fast. Rumor is, they already own half the state." Colt's jaw tightened. "And what outfit would that be?" he asked coolly. The man shrugged. "Harlan Holdings. You'd know, if you'd ever read the papers. Richest cowboy in Montana. They say he's got no heart, though, lost it years ago." Grace didn't notice the way Colt's hands clenched. Didn't see the flicker of recognition and guilt that passed over his face like a shadow, because he was Harlan. Colt Harlan, the same man who once built an empire, lost a wife, and rode away from it all to disappear among the dust, and now fate had brought him back, to the one woman who didn't care about his money, his name, or his ghosts. For days after that encounter, Colt kept his secret buried. He helped Grace repair the barns, drive cattle, and haul feed. The more time they spent together, the harder it became to imagine leaving. Grace laughed like sunlight breaking through storm clouds, and every time she smiled at him, the walls he'd built over years of grief began to crumble, but the deadline loomed like a storm. Grace stayed up late each night, scribbling numbers, trying to find a way to save the ranch her father had built. Colt watched her shoulders shake quietly once when she thought he was asleep, and it broke something inside him that he could have fixed it all with one phone call. One signature. But he'd sworn never to touch that life again, the empire, the name, the power that had cost him everything. That night, he rode out under the stars and found himself at the old creek, the same place his wife had died in a riding accident years before. He fell to his knees, whispering into the darkness, "I can't lose another one. Not her." The next morning, Grace found him already saddled up. "You leaving?" she asked, her voice trembling that he looked at her, really looked, and smiled sadly. "Sometimes to do right by someone, you gotta disappear a while." She didn't understand. "Colt, don't," but he was gone. Days later, men from Harlan Holdings arrived at her ranch again, only this time, not to take it. They brought papers. A deed transfer. The land was paid off, debts cleared, the ranch now legally hers. Grace stood on the porch, stunned. "Who did this?" The man smiled faintly. "Colt Harlan's orders, ma'am. Said to tell you, he finally found a reason to come home." Her heart stopped. "Harlan? You mean, he?" The man tipped his hat. "He's at his old estate north of Helena. Said if you wanted to yell at him, you know where to find him." Grace didn't hesitate. She rode through the night. When she reached the mansion gates, she saw him there, clean-shaven, wearing a crisp shirt, the same storm-colored eyes now filled with something she hadn't seen before. "Hope, you lied to me," she said, voice breaking. "I did," he admitted quietly. "I didn't want you to see the man I used to be. I wanted to earn your trust as a man, not a name." Grace's eyes filled with tears. "You think love needs proof, Colt? You could have just told me." He stepped closer, removing his hat. "I hadn't loved anyone in years, Grace. Not since the day the light went out of my life. Then you came along, and I remembered what it felt like to breathe." She stared at him, at the man who had saved her ranch, her dreams, her heart, and realized he wasn't the drifter she thought he was, nor the tycoon the world saw. He was something in between, a man finally ready to let go of his ghosts. Grace smiled softly. "So what now, Mr. Harlan?" He smiled back, eyes glistening. "Now we build something that can't be bought." And as the sun broke over the Montana horizon, she took his hand, the drifter and the ranch girl, two souls who'd lost everything finding a new beginning together.